Well, Canada is now in a new era of trade uncertainty. The United States has imposed 50% tariffs on virtually all Canadian goods, with Prime Minister Carney saying the levies will be matched dollar for dollar starting in September.
Well, we made progress, and we did make some progress in recent weeks. In the end, that momentum reversed, and we could not accept what the U.S. had offered, nor could we give what they asked.
In response, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to increase tariffs on autos, auto parts, and steel in the new year to 50%. In a post on Truth Social, he said Canada feels, quote, entitled and will be, quote, treated like a state no longer. All right, for more on this latest escalation in the trade war, former U.S. Ambassador to Canada, David L. Cohen, joins me now. He actually served in that role from 2021 to 2024 during the Biden administration. Mr. Cohen, we appreciate this. Welcome to the program. Joining us from Philadelphia.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the air. As I said right before we went on the air, I'm sorry to have to be on the air to talk about such an unpleasant topic, because there are a lot of pleasant things that we could talk about in the U.S.-Canada relationship, at least historically.
Well, we appreciate this. I mean, appropriate perhaps that you're joining us from the city of brotherly love, because at this point, not much brotherly love being felt on both sides of the border. Look, emotions are charged. How do you, I guess, cool the temperature right now, given this heated moment?
So if I can, and I should have learned, I don't like picking at an interview or question, but I think there's a lot of brotherly love and sisterly affection between Canada and the United States. We're just not seeing a lot of that from our president. But when you look at the members of the United States Senate, when you look at governors, particular governors in the 37 states that count Canada as their #1 export destination, when you look at the House of Representatives, when you look at businesses, business leaders, business associations, when you look at civil society, there continues to be a huge amount of respect and affection for Canada on the United States side of the border, which is the reason for my optimism that there will come a time when this relationship can be put back together again.
Well said.
Today is likely not that time.
Right.
And I will say, in direct response to your question, there's a reason this is called a trade war. And that word war, I don't use lightly. But in a war, you get people behaving emotionally. You may get people behaving irrationally. The one thing I'm certain of is that the rhetoric that we're seeing today, and by the way, it's rhetoric on both sides
Precisely.
of the border. I consider myself a friend and admirer of Premier Ford, but some of the things that he said were not appropriate. But the things that President Trump says, and I am very sparing in my criticism of President Trump because I have too much respect for the office of the president, but the rhetoric that he uses toward one of the United States' most important and long-standing friends, partners, and allies is just not appropriate. It's not excusable.
Yeah, you took the question. Forgive me for jumping in, but you took my question effectively, because you wonder if this is going to derail the situation and any possible negotiation any further. But I mean, look, billions of dollars hang in the balance here, thousands and thousands of jobs on both sides of the border. So we're looking at this escalating trade war. Obviously, Canada is a much smaller player, but how do you come to terms that is at least equitable, might not be the right word, but at least fair?
Okay. So here's, you know, you've heard me before, we've met before. I always see the glass as half full. Maybe it's a weakness, but I think it's a strength. And so I'm optimistic that there is a pathway here. I can't define it right now, but I think there's a pathway there. And one of the reasons for my optimism is Prime Minister Carney. Prime Minister Carney has approached these negotiations, I think, as close to perfectly as you can. He has not been public in Canada's negotiating posture. He has not been public in any criticism of President Trump or of the United States position. He has been reasoned. He and Minister LeBlanc and Chief Trade Negotiator Charette have done the work. They have met in private. They have negotiated in private. And they've been, when the negotiations fell apart and Prime Minister Carney was pressed to explain why, he did so in reasoned, calm fashion and didn't shut the door on ultimately coming to an agreement. And I think the only way to get to an agreement is to get out of the daily press conferences, to stop with the threats both ways, and to figure out a way to get back at the table. And I was even heartened about that, because yesterday the quasi-public positioning from Canada and the United States was that there were no negotiations scheduled and would not be negotiations. Today, we heard from the United States side that there was a willingness to discuss, and we heard from the Canadian side that with an adjustment in attitude, there was a willingness on Canada's part to come back to the table. That's the only way to resolve this, to turn the temperature down, is in the privacy of the negotiating room, the same way that Minister LeBlanc and Chief Trade Negotiator Charette were able to make at least some material progress leading up to the original deadline.
Well, certainly millions of people on both sides of the border hope so, and hope that things will get back to normal, at least any semblance of normalcy very soon. We appreciate your time as always, sir. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on.
That is former American Ambassador to Canada, David L. Cohen, joining us from Philadelphia. Thank you again.